Okay, guys, this is a lesson 2.6 on ratios and proportions.
Cross multiply. Sauce.
Yeah, I know you're probably thinking, what the heck was that about? Yeah, we'll get to that in a little while. But whenever we say the word proportion,
Cross multiply. Sauce.
I want to throw that little clip at you. Anyways, so what is a ratio? If you guys remember from the previous chapter 1 when we classified numbers, a ratio, well, according to the book, a ratio is a comparison of two numbers with division. We already know a ratio, it's just a fraction. Okay, so a ratio is just a fraction. Okay, and how about proportions?
Cross multiply. Sauce.
A proportion is an equation stating that two ratios are equal. In other words, one fraction equals another fraction, okay? And whenever we do have a proportion, we are able to
cross multiply. Sauce.
So what the heck do I mean by cross multiply? Well, whenever you have a fraction equal to another fraction, which is a proportion, and it could be any fraction. I'm not even going to use numbers here. Let's say A over B, that's a fraction. And if it's equal to C over D, this is what we call a proportion. And of course, when we have proportions, we can
cross multiply. Sauce.
So this is what I mean by cross multiply. You could take your A value and multiply it by your D value, and that should be equal to your B value multiplied by your C value. And it doesn't have to be A times A, it could be D times A, or it could be C times B. But the idea is that you're multiplying the numerator with the other denominator and multiplying this other denominator with the other numerator. So you're cross multiplying, okay? And you can only cross multiply when you have a fraction equal to a fraction, when you have a proportion, okay? So let's write this out. A times D equals B times C. So what this does, guys, is this cross multiplying, the sauce right there, what it does, it eliminates the fractions, and you have now a simple equation that you should be able to solve. Let's look at the simplest type of proportion. Let me move this to the side and save it for later. So let's take any fraction. Let's say 6/8, or I could call that the ratio 6 over 8. 6 over 8 it could be reduced. So what could we reduce 6 over 8 to? Well, you could reduce by 2, and you would get 3 over 4. Because if you go 6 divided by 2, you get the 3. 8 divided by 2, you get the 4. So 6/8 really does reduce down to 3/4. And what do we have here? We have a fraction equals to another fraction, which means that we actually have a proportion.
Cross multiply. Sauce.
That's right. When you cross multiply 6 times 4, that is 24. Let's write that out. 6 times 4, that will be 24, but let's not even do that yet. And let's cross multiply with the other side over here. 8 times 3, and 8 times 3, we also know is 24. But we know that when you do cross multiply, those values will equal each other. So again, it's sauce, right? 6 times 4 equals 8 times 3. 6 times 4 equals 8 times 3. That's what I'm talking about when I say cross multiply sauce, right? So as you can see, this is a true statement. We do have 6 times 4, that's 24. And we have 8 times 3, that's also 24. So what we mentioned over here, cross multiplying, or the cross product property, it is a true statement. Anytime you have one fraction equal to another fraction, you can
cross multiply. Sauce.
And you will get a true statement, right? Like right here, 6 times 4 is 8 times 3. That's 24 equals 24, true statement. But I do need to take a moment and really emphasize that you could only cross multiply when you have proportions. That is, one fraction equaling another fraction. Like this example right here. It's a proportion. You have a fraction equals to another fraction, so you can cross multiply. However, if you had something like this, then right here you would not be able to cross multiply. You can only cross multiply when you have one fraction equaling another fraction. Right here you have one fraction equaling another fraction, but plus another fraction. Right here you cannot cross multiply. Right here, big no-no, no cross multiplying here. Only on proportions is where you could actually
Cross multiply.
So we might as well show how we are going to do this top one. So again, cross multiplying is this one times that one equals this one times that one. So let's write that out. The x multiplied by 6 is going to equal 3 times 4. And it doesn't matter which order you go. You could say x times 6 or 6 times x. You could say x times 6 or 6 times x. You could say 3 times 4 or 4 times 3, whatever you want. So anyhow, let's continue working here with this red equation. X times 6 is 6x, and 3 times 4 is 12. So we have a simple equation that says 6x equals 12. If you want to get rid of the multiplication of 6 in the front, you're going to have to divide by 6, divided by 6, cancels out, x equals 2. That's your final answer right there. Now, if we were to look at this guy over here, we cannot solve this equation by cross multiplying. You just cannot do it. So if you were to solve this equation, let me make a little more space, and let me actually solve this equation. What's probably confusing you guys right now are the fractions. And of course, you could get rid of fractions by multiplying everything by the denominator of the fraction that you want to get rid of. And of course, if you wanted to get rid of all 3 fractions at the same time, you could multiply everything by the LCD, which would happen to be 6. So let me actually go through. This is what you would do. Times 6, times 6, times 6. That way the 6 over 3 cancels out. There's a 2, and the 2 times the x is 2x. The 6 cancels out. We have 2x equals 4. And the 6 and the 2 cancel out, and there's a 3 left over up on top, so that would be a plus 3. So we would have 2x equals 7. And of course, if you divide both sides by 2, I ran out of space, sorry, you end up with 7/2. So that's how you would do that other one. You can only cross multiply when you have a proportion, when you have one fraction, only one fraction, equaling another fraction. Again, if you have anything else, even if you have like a plus 2 over here, you can't do cross multiply, all right? You can't do the cross product. So you can't have anything. It has to be a proportion where you have one fraction equaling another fraction. So here's one of the worksheets that we're going to be doing this week, 2.6 WSP, and this is all about ratios and proportions, right? So let's take a look at one of these guys. How about number 23? 23, it is a proportion, so that means that you can
Cross multiply.
I'm sorry, that's probably getting really annoying, isn't it? Yeah, so of course we're going to cross multiply. So let's take the 3 and set it up. 3 times 6. So let's write that out. 3 times 6. Bring down the equal sign, and then q times 5. Q times 5. So 3 times 6 is 18, and q times 5 is 5q. So there's our simple equation. All we have to do now is get the q by itself. Let's divide by 5. Divide by 5. Q equals 18 over 5. And that's your improper fraction. If you wanted to change it to a mixed fraction, just say 18 divided by 5, because that's what this fraction really is. It's a division problem, 18 divided by 5. So when you go back to that division problem, 5 will go into 18 how many times without going over? 3. And that'll be 15. And of course, you're going to have a remainder of 3. So the remainder always goes over the original divisor. So 3 3/5 or 18/5 is an acceptable answer. Now, it's not always going to be just one number and just one letter. As we see on this homework assignment, let's take a look at number 28 right here. We actually have, it's still a proportion, so we're still going to be able to cross multiply. Okay, no more. Sorry, no more. Maybe one more time in a little bit. But anyway, number 28, we are going to cross multiply. Okay, and notice that we have 2 terms down here. So that changes things. It's not as easy as saying 7 times 6 equals 8 times 14. We actually have a binomial here. So both terms are in the denominator. This is what we're going to have to do, guys. I recommend you put parentheses around it because it's a binomial. That's what's in the denominator. And now we could actually write it out. 7 times 6 equals the a minus 4 in the parenthesis times 14. Okay? So what does that mean? That means that I have 7 times 6, which is 42. So I have 42 on this side. I have the equal sign. And over here, I actually have to do distributive property. 14 times a is 14a. And then 14 times 4, of course, with a minus sign in front of it, that's going to be 56. Of course, you could use calculators. So we have this new simple equation to solve. But again, I'm emphasizing here that if it's a binomial down here, use parentheses. So when you set it up, 7 times 6, there it is, equals this times that, 14 times that. So you have to put that in as a binomial in parentheses so you remember to distribute the 14, okay? So let's continue solving this guy. Let's make some space up here. We want to get a by itself, so let's get rid of the 56, the minus 56, by doing the opposite, plus 56, to both sides. And of course, we're going to have the equal sign that comes down, 14a on this side, and 42 plus 56 is 98. Final step would be to get rid of the 14 in front of the a. That's really 14 times a, so I'm going to divide by 14 and divide by 14. And of course, you could use a calculator. 98 divided by 14 is 7. So I have 7 equals a equals 7. So that's my answer to this number 28. Let's jump to number 30 here. So again, if you happen to have two terms in the numerator or the denominator, what do I recommend? Use parentheses. Put parentheses around those two terms so you could actually view it as one item, okay? So when you cross multiply, you're going to have the binomial in parentheses m minus 1 times 4 equals 8 times 2. So let's cross multiply. M minus 1 times 4 equals the 8 times 2. 8 times 2. Again, cross multiplying. So now we need to solve this equation, and just like when we used to solve equations before, step one is to simplify each side, do any math possible. So clearly on the left side, I could distribute 4 times m, that's 4m, 4 times negative 1, that is negative 4. Bring down the equal sign, and of course, you can't do anything else on the left side. But on the right side, you have an 8 times 2, you could do that, that is 16. So I put a 16 right there. And now let's get m all by itself on the left side. I want to get rid of this minus 4 by doing the opposite, which would be plus 4. Which you do to one side, you do to the other side. We're going to have 4m equals 20. So my final step will be to divide by 4 to get rid of that multiplication of 4 in the front of m. And 20 divided by 4 is 5. So m equals 5. That is our answer. And that's how it's done.
Cross multiply. Sauce.